The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace above Nexus 7. Vexitar pressed his four-fingered hand against the viewport, watching the planet grow larger below. The world looked scarred from orbit. Brown patches marked where forests once grew. Silver lines showed where rivers had been redirected by weapons fire. This was a war zone. Vexitar had seen many battlefields in his 30 years as a military observer for the Keltharian Empire. He had watched the fierce Draknari warriors charge across burning plains. He had studied the tactical brilliance of the crystal-based Thessian commanders. He had documented the relentless advance of the machine armies of Sector 9. But today was different. Today he would meet humans. The newest members of the Galactic Coalition had arrived only 6 months ago. Their ships were primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was basic. Their biology was unremarkable. Yet somehow they had convinced the Coalition leadership to accept them as military allies. Vexitar's mission was simple: observe human combat capabilities and report back to Keltharian High Command. The transport touched down at Forward Operating Base Harmony with a soft thud. Vexitar gathered his recording equipment and stepped outside. The base was larger than he expected. Prefabricated buildings stretched in neat rows. Defense towers dotted the perimeter. Coalition forces from a dozen species moved between structures, with practiced efficiency. A figure approached from the main command building. Vexitar recognized the basic humanoid shape from the briefing files: 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head. No natural armor. No visible weapons. The being was smaller than Vexitar by at least a foot. Its skin was pale brown and mostly hairless except for the top of its head. It wore a simple military uniform marked with unfamiliar symbols. "Observer Vexitar," the human said in passable galactic standard. "I am Colonel Jehun Park, commanding officer of the 3rd Human Expeditionary Force. Welcome to Nexus 7. Vexitar activated his translation implant and extended a greeting gesture. "Colonel Park, thank you for accommodating my observation mission, Q." Smiled, showing small white teeth. "Not a problem. We're happy to work with our coalition partners." He gestured toward the command building. "Shall we get you settled in?" As they walked, Vexitar studied the human commander. Park moved with economy of motion. His eyes constantly scanned the environment. His posture suggested alertness without tension. These were the habits of an experienced soldier, but nothing more remarkable than Vexitar had seen in other species. Inside the command center, Park introduced him to Sergeant Minji Kim. She was smaller than Park, with darker hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her handshake was firm but brief. She handed Vexitar a data pad containing base layout and security protocols. "The sergeant will be your liaison during your stay," Park explained. "She'll make sure you have access to whatever you need for your observations." Kim nodded politely. "Observer Vexitar, your quarters are in Building 7. Meal times are posted on your pad. Do you have any dietary restrictions we should know about?" "Standard Coalition rations are adequate," Vexitar replied. He was impressed by their organization. Many species struggled with basic hospitality protocols when dealing with aliens. "When will I have the opportunity to observe your forces in action?" Park and Kim exchanged a brief look. "Tomorrow morning we begin Operation Crimson Dawn," Park said. "Joint Coalition assault on Zephyrian positions in the Bleeding Canyons. You're welcome to accompany us." Vexitar felt a flutter of anticipation. The Zephyrians were known for their brutal effectiveness in combat. Their crystalline exoskeletons could deflect most energy weapons. Their hive mind coordination made them nearly impossible to outmaneuver. This would be an excellent test of human capabilities. "I would be honored to observe," he said. Kim led him to his quarters through the base. Vexitar noted the human soldiers they passed. They came in different sizes and colors, but all shared certain characteristics. They moved quietly. They maintained awareness of their surroundings. They kept their equipment in perfect condition. Standard military discipline. What struck him as unusual was their apparent casualness. A group near the armory were sharing food and laughing at something one of them had said. Another pair played some kind of game with small rectangular cards. A third soldier sat alone, writing in what appeared to be a personal journal. Your troops seem relaxed for soldiers about to enter combat, Vextar observed. Kim glanced at the soldiers he indicated. Combat is tomorrow. Tonight they prepare in their own ways. Some check equipment, some review tactics, some connect with home. Everyone handles pre-battle stress differently. At Building 7, Kim showed him to a small but comfortable room. Standard coalition furniture adjusted to his physiology. A basic communication terminal connected to the base network. A window looked out over the training grounds where soldiers practiced combat drills. Dinner is served from 1800 to 2000 hours, Kim said. The mess hall is Building 3. Feel free to sit with any group that welcomes you. Most of our people are curious about other coalition species. After Kim left, Vextar unpacked his equipment and began his preliminary observations. He positioned recording devices around his room and activated passive scanners to monitor base communications. His initial report would need detailed documentation of human military culture. As evening approached, he made his way to the mess hall. The building was filled with the sounds of conversation and eating. Humans sat in small groups around tables laden with food. The smells were unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Someone had made an effort to accommodate different dietary needs as plates held various types of prepared meals. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see a young human soldier with short black hair and friendly eyes. You must be the Keltharian observer, she said. I'm Corporal Dongho Lee. Would you like to join us? She gestured to a table where 4 other humans sat eating and talking. Vextar accepted the invitation and took a seat. Lee introduced her companions. Private Soo-young Choi, a compact woman with calloused hands. Medic Hyunwoo Nam, who wore medical insignia on his uniform. Specialist Garam Shin, barely out of adolescence by human standards. And Staff Sergeant Tae Hyun, an older soldier with graying hair. So what do you think of our little operation here? Asked, cutting a piece of synthetic meat with precise movements. Impressive organization, Vexitar replied honestly. Your people seem well prepared. Choi laughed. We better be. The Zephyrians don't give second chances. Have you fought them before? Vexitar asked. The table went quiet for a moment. Nam set down his fork. Few times. They're tough. But everyone bleeds if you know where to cut. The casual way he said it made Vextar's skin prickle. There was something in the medic's tone that suggested more than professional knowledge of anatomy. Combat is combat, Shin added, looking younger than his years. You do what needs doing and go home to your family. Nodded and pulled out a small device displaying images. My daughter's school play last month. She played a tree. He showed the picture with obvious pride. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. The conversation shifted to families and home. Lee talked about her brother's wedding. Choi described her mother's garden. Nam mentioned a dog he was planning to adopt after his deployment ended. They seemed like any other species, discussing normal life concerns, but Vextar noticed things that unsettled him. The way they held their eating utensils suggested familiarity with knives as tools and weapons. Their conversation about home was warm, but their eyes continued scanning the room for threats. When another soldier approached their table, every human at the table identified him before he spoke. After dinner, Vextar walked the base perimeter. Coalition regulations required all personnel to be in quarters by 2200 hours, but he wanted to observe human behavior in the final hours before combat. He found them everywhere. In the armory, soldiers cleaned weapons with ritual precision. In the communications center, others reviewed intelligence reports and tactical maps. A group near the medical building discussed casualty evacuation procedures with their medics. What disturbed him most was their silence. Other species talked constantly before battle. They told stories, shared fears, sought reassurance from comrades. The humans worked mostly in quiet efficiency. When they did speak, it was about mission details or technical specifications. At 2300 hours, Vextar returned to his quarters and began composing his initial report. He described human organization, equipment, and pre-combat preparation. Everything seemed professionally adequate but unremarkable. Then he paused at his keyboard. Something nagged at him about the evening's observations. The humans had been friendly and welcoming. They had shared personal stories and shown genuine warmth, but underneath that surface he sensed something else, a coldness that never quite disappeared, a calculation behind every smile. He thought about Medic Nam's comment about bleeding, about the way Staff Sergeant O could shift from discussing his daughter to planning tomorrow's assault without any change in expression, about how every human he met seemed to be constantly aware of everyone around them. Vextar deleted his last paragraph and started again. There was more to human nature than first appearances suggested. Tomorrow's battle would reveal what lay beneath their civilized exterior. Something told him he was about to witness capabilities that no speed. Dawn came early on Nexus 7. Vextar woke to the sound of boots on metal flooring and voices calling quiet orders. Through his window, he watched human soldiers moving in the gray morning light. They carried weapons and equipment with practiced ease. No one seemed hurried or stressed. He dressed quickly and made his way to the mess hall. The building was already half full of coalition forces eating breakfast. Keltharian troops sat in tight formation, discussing battle plans in formal Sioux tones. Thessian crystal beings communicated through harmonic vibrations that made the walls hum. Draknari warriors sharpened their natural claws on whetstones. The humans sat scattered throughout the hall in small groups. Their conversations were casual, almost relaxed. Vextar joined a table where Sergeant Minji Kim was eating with several other soldiers. "Good morning, Observer," Kim said. "Ready to see us in action?" "I am eager to document your combat methods," Vextar replied, activating his recording device. "What can you tell me about today's operation?" A young soldier named Private Yuna Han looked up from her meal. "Standard assault mission. We move through contested territory to the target zone. Coalition forces provide support. We neutralize enemy positions and secure the area." Lieutenant Garam Shin nodded agreement. "The Zephyrians have been building up defenses for weeks. Intel shows automated weapons, prepared positions, and at least 3 companies of their warriors." Vextar felt concern growing in his chest. Zephyrian companies consisted of 50 fighters each. Their exoskeletons could withstand direct hits from most coalition weapons. Their hive coordination made them nearly impossible to surprise or outflank. "That seems like a significant challenge," he said carefully. Captain Sunho Bei joined their table carrying a steaming cup of something that smelled like burned plant matter. "Every mission is a challenge. That's what makes it interesting." The Yao. Captain's tone was conversational, as if discussing weather rather than life-and-death combat. Vextar studied his face for signs of bravado or false confidence. He found neither. Bei simply seemed to accept the coming battle as routine business. "How long have you been fighting the Zephyrians?" Vexitar asked. "About 8 months, Han replied. "They're tough, but they have patterns. Once you figure out how they think, you can work around their advantages." Shin laughed and shared a look with the others at the table. "Remember the ambush at Ridge 7? "That was beautiful," Kim agreed. "Textbook misdirection." They began discussing previous battles with the same casual tone others might use for sporting events. Vexitar listened carefully, but their references were too vague to understand specific tactics. What struck him was their confidence, not arrogance or boasting, but simple certainty that they would succeed. After breakfast, coalition forces assembled in the main courtyard. Vexitar counted roughly 200 soldiers from 6 different species. Colonel Park addressed the group through translation speakers. "Operation Crimson Dawn begins in 30 minutes, Park announced. "Our objective is the elimination of enemy positions in the Bleeding Canyons. Intelligence indicates heavy fortification and strong resistance. Stay alert, follow your training, and watch out for your teammates." "Standard pre-combat briefing," Vexitar noted. Nothing remarkable about the content or delivery. But as Park spoke, Vextar noticed something subtle. The human soldiers weren't just listening to orders. They were studying the other coalition species, noting their positions, equipment, and apparent readiness levels. The march began at 800 hours. Mixed units moved in standard formation through the base gates and into the contested zone beyond. Vextar walked with the human command group, recording everything for later analysis. The landscape of Nexus 7 was harsh even without war damage. Rocky hills covered in sparse vegetation stretched toward distant mountains. The bleeding canyons got their name from red mineral deposits that looked like dried blood when sunlight hit them. But war had made the terrain much worse. Burned settlements dotted the route like broken teeth. Craters from orbital bombardments created temporary lakes filled with stagnant water. The remains of vehicles and equipment littered the roadside. Most disturbing were the bodies. Coalition and Zephyrian dead lay where they had fallen in previous battles. The dry climate preserved them well. Vextar tried not to look too closely, but the sight made him understand the stakes of their mission. The Coalition forces maintained strict marching order. Each species stayed in formation. Communication followed proper channels. Guards watched, assigned sectors. Everything proceeded according to military doctrine. The humans moved differently. They maintained their assigned positions, but they also seemed to flow around obstacles with unusual coordination. When the column stopped to clear debris from the path, human soldiers spread out without orders to provide security. When they resumed marching, they fell back into formation seamlessly. During the first rest break, Vextar interviewed several human soldiers. Staff Sergeant Tai-Hyun Oh sat in whatever shade he could find, cleaning his rifle while talking about his family. "My daughter's getting good grades in school," Oh said, running a cloth along the weapon's barrel. "She wants to study engineering when she gets older, maybe help design better ships for exploring space." "You must miss her during deployment," Vextar observed. Oh paused in his cleaning. "Every day, but that's why we're here, so she can grow up in a galaxy where humans and aliens work together instead of fighting each other." The sentiment was touching, but Vextar noticed how O's hands never stopped moving. Even while discussing family, he continued maintaining his weapon with automatic precision. His eyes regularly scanned their surroundings for potential threats. Private Soo-Young Choi sat nearby, sharing ration bars with Coalition troops from other species. She laughed at their stories and asked questions about their homeworlds, but Vextar observed that she positioned herself with clear sight lines to all approaches. Her own weapon remained within easy reach. "The war will end eventually," Choi told a young Thessian soldier. "Then we can all go home and build something better together." Again, warm sentiment delivered with casual confidence. But Vextar noticed how naturally she assumed human victory, not hoped for it or worked toward it, but simply expected it as inevitable outcome. As they resumed marching, Medic Hyunwoo Nam fell into step beside Vextar. "What do you think of our operation so far?" "Very professional," Vextar replied honestly. "Your people seem well trained." Nam nodded. "We've had good teachers. Humans learn fast when survival depends on it." "Learn what?" "How to win," Nam said simply. "How to protect what matters. How to make sure the people trying to hurt our friends don't get the chance." Something in the medic's tone made Vextar's skin prickle. Nam spoke about winning and protecting with the same clinical detachment he probably used when discussing medical procedures. There was no emotion in it, just professional assessment of required actions. The second rest break came at midday. Long-range scouts reported heavy Zephyrian activity ahead. Coalition Command reviewed tactical maps and discussed assault options. The canyon approaches offered several routes, but all led through prepared defensive positions. Colonel Park studied the intelligence reports with his officers. Vextar positioned himself close enough to overhear their planning session. "Standard frontal assault will cost us 30 to 40% casualties," Park said matter-of-factly. "The Zephyrians have overlapping fields of fire and prepared fallback positions." "What about flanking maneuvers?" Lieutenant Colonel Jinwoo Yu asked, tracing routes on the map. "Possible, but their scouts will spot us before we get into position. They'll have time to reposition and cut us off." The human officers discussed various approaches with calm professionalism. They talked about casualty rates and tactical disadvantages, the same way others might discuss weather conditions. No fear, no hesitation, just practical problem solving. We'll proceed with the original plan, Park decided. Begin final approach at 1400 hours. All units will advance on schedule. As the meeting broke up, Vextar approached Colonel Park. The intelligence report suggests significant enemy advantages. Are you concerned about casualties? Park looked at him with steady eyes. I'm concerned about completing the mission. Casualties are part of warfare. The goal is to minimize them while achieving objectives. How do you maintain morale when facing such odds? Our people understand the stakes, Park replied. They trust their training and their teammates. Fear comes from uncertainty. When you know what you're capable of, there's nothing to fear. The colonel's confidence seemed absolute, but Vextar wondered if it was realistic. Human weapons and armor appeared standard for their technology level. Their numbers were smaller than enemy forces. Their experience with galactic warfare was limited. Yet as afternoon approached and combat drew near, the human soldiers showed no signs of nervousness or doubt. They checked their equipment with methodical care. They reviewed tactical positions with quiet efficiency. They prepared for battle like craftsmen preparing for familiar work. Vextar noticed other changes as well. The casual conversation from morning had mostly stopped. Facial expressions became more neutral. Body language shifted into patterns he recognized from predatory species preparing to hunt. At 1400 hours, coalition forces began their final advance toward the bleeding canyons. In the distance, Vextar could. The first shots came at 1530 hours. Zephyrian snipers hidden in the canyon walls opened fire on the approaching coalition forces. Energy beams cut through the air with deadly precision. 3 Dreknari warriors fell in the first volley, their natural armor cracking under focused fire. Coalition forces immediately took cover behind rocks and debris. Unit commanders called for air support and artillery strikes. Standard military response to sniper fire, exactly as Vexitar expected. He crouched behind a boulder with Colonel Park's command group recording the engagement. The humans reacted differently. While other species sought cover and called for support, Corporal Dongho Lee simply disappeared. One moment, he was prone behind a fallen tree. The next moment, the space was empty. Vextar blinked, wondering if his eyes had failed him. Where did Lee go? He asked Sergeant Kim. Kim checked her tactical display without concern. He's handling the sniper problem. Handling it how? I don't see any human units moving toward enemy positions. Kim looked at him with an expression that might have been pity. You won't see Lee until he wants to be seen. That's the point. Vexitar activated his long-range sensors, scanning the canyon walls for human movement. The devices detected coalition forces maintaining defensive positions. They detected Zephyrian snipers in elevated positions. They detected no humans advancing through the difficult terrain. 8 minutes later, the sniper fire stopped. Lee's voice came through the communication system with calm professionalism. Overwatch positions neutralized, advances clear. He reappeared, at his original position as quietly as he had vanished. His uniform showed dirt and scrapes from climbing, but no other signs of his recent activity. When Vexitar looked closely, he noticed dark stains on Lee's knife that had not been there before. How did you eliminate multiple sniper positions so quickly? Vextar asked. Lee cleaned his blade with practiced motions. Zephyrians have good eyes, but they focus on what they expect to see. Move where they don't expect. Approach from angles they don't watch, and their advantages don't matter. The casual way he described infiltrating enemy positions and killing trained snipers made Vextar's blood chill. Lee spoke like someone discussing a routine maintenance task, not a deadly combat operation. Coalition forces began their advance into the canyon under covering fire from support units. The terrain was broken and difficult, providing multiple choke points where defenders could inflict heavy casualties. Vextar expected slow, careful movement under constant threat. Instead, he watched human soldiers adapt to the battlefield in ways that defied conventional tactics. When a Zephyrian machine gun emplacement pinned down a mixed coalition squad, Private Su-Young Choi didn't wait for heavy weapon support. She studied the position for 30 seconds, then moved with 3 other humans in a coordinated pattern that seemed almost choreographed. They didn't charge the position directly. They didn't try to suppress it with return fire. Instead, they flowed through the terrain like water, finding the easiest path downhill. Choi appeared behind the emplacement while her teammates created distractions from other angles. The machine gun fell silent. When Choi signaled all clear, Vextar saw Zephyrian bodies that looked like they had been taken apart by someone with detailed knowledge of their anatomy. How did she know the weak points in their exoskeletons? Vextar asked medic Hyunwoo Nam was treating wounded coalition soldiers with gentle efficiency. His hands worked with practiced skill, cleaning wounds and applying medical supplies. But when he looked up to answer Vextar's question, his expression held disturbing knowledge. "Same way I know how to fix them when they're broken," Nam said quietly. "You learn anatomy to help people heal. You learn anatomy to help them die quickly. The knowledge works both ways." The medic's tone remained professional and caring, but Vextar realized he was looking at someone who understood killing with the same precision he used for healing. Nam could probably disable any coalition species with medical instruments if he chose to do so. As the advance continued, Vextar documented more examples of human combat effectiveness that went beyond normal military training. They didn't just fight the enemy. They seemed to understand enemy psychology and use it as a weapon. Lieutenant Garam Shin coordinated an assault on a fortified bunker. Instead of direct attack, his squad created what appeared to be tactical confusion. They fired from multiple positions in rapid sequence, making a small unit seem like a much larger force. They used captured Zephyrian equipment to send false communications that convinced the defenders they were being flanked from 3 directions. When the defenders abandoned their strong position to respond to phantom threats, Shin's actual assault came from the one direction they hadn't anticipated. The bunker fell in minutes with minimal coalition casualties. "Psychological warfare," Colonel Park explained when Vexitar asked about the tactics. "Fear and confusion are weapons just like guns and explosives. Sometimes more effective because they make the enemy defeat themselves." The most disturbing moment came when Zephyrian shock troops launched a counterattack against coalition positions. These were elite warriors, heavily armored and moving in perfect coordination. Their crystalline exoskeletons could deflect most energy weapons. Their hive-mind communication made them nearly impossible to surprise. Other coalition species fell back to secondary positions and called for orbital support. The humans did something else entirely. Staff Sergeant Tai Hyun-oh positioned his squad in what appeared to be a defensive line. But as the Zephyrian charge approached, Vextar realized they weren't trying to stop the attack. They were channeling it into a killing zone of their own design. The humans had studied Zephyrian attack patterns and prepared accordingly. When the shock troops hit their line, they found themselves trapped in overlapping fields of fire from positions they hadn't detected. Worse, the humans had anticipated their communication methods and were jamming their hive-mind coordination. Individual Zephyrians were dangerous. Groups of coordinated Zephyrians were nearly unstoppable. Confused Zephyrians separated from their unit coordination were just heavily armored targets moving in predictable patterns. O's squad methodically destroyed the entire assault force, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through understanding their enemy better than the enemy understood themselves. When the engagement ended, O checked on his wounded soldiers with the same gentle concern he showed when discussing his daughter. The same hands that had directed the systematic elimination of enemy forces now administered first aid with infinite care. "Combat is problem-solving," he explained to Vexitar while bandaging a minor wound on one of his troops. "You identify obstacles, determine solutions, and execute with appropriate force. The emotional part comes later." Vextar began to understand what he was witnessing. The humans weren't superior soldiers because of better equipment or training. They were superior because they approached warfare as natural predators who had learned to use tools and tactics. Other species fought wars. Humans hunted enemies. As afternoon turned toward evening, coalition forces secured their objectives in the bleeding canyons. Zephyrian resistance collapsed not from overwhelming force, but from systematic elimination of their command structure and communication networks. The humans had turned a fortified position into a trap that caught the defenders instead of the attackers. Captain Sunho Bay coordinated casualty reports with the same calm professionalism he had shown all day. Coalition losses were lighter than projected. Human losses were minimal. Enemy casualties were comprehensive. How do you maintain such effectiveness with relatively primitive equipment? Vextar asked. Bay looked at him with eyes that held depths. Vextar was only beginning to understand. Equipment doesn't win battles, people do. The question isn't what tools you have, but how well you understand what needs to be done and how willing you are to do it. As darkness fell over the bleeding canyons, Vextar realized his mission had fundamentally changed. He had come to observe human military capabilities and document their strengths and weaknesses for Keltharian intelligence. Instead, he was beginning to understand that he had encountered something far more complex and dangerous than anyone in the galaxy suspected. The humans weren't just competent soldiers. They were apex predators who had learned to cooperate and use technology. The horror wasn't that they could fight effectively. The horror was how naturally it came to them, and how little it seemed to cost them emotionally. They killed with precision and efficiency, then immediately returned to caring for wounded comrades and planning the next phase of operations. For the first time since arriving on Nexus 7, Vextar wondered if documenting human capabilities was wise. Some knowledge might be too dangerous to share, even with allies. In the growing darkness, human soldiers established security perimeters and tended to their equipment. They moved through the captured positions like professionals completing familiar work. Whatever they were, Vextar was certain of one thing. No species in the galaxy was prepared for what humans could do when they decided to win. The Zephyrian counterattack came at dawn with the fury of a dying star. 3 full battalions of mechanized infantry emerged from hidden tunnels throughout the canyon system. Air support screamed overhead, raining energy fire on coalition positions. The ground shook with the impact of heavy weapons. Coalition forces responded according to standard military doctrine. Unit commanders established defensive perimeters. Communication specialists called for orbital support. Heavy weapons teams prepared to engage enemy armor. Everything preceded by the tactical manual. The humans did something entirely different. Vextar watched from the command post as Sergeant Narijo led her squad away from the main defensive line. At first, he assumed they were conducting a flanking, maneuver or reconnaissance mission. Then he realized they weren't trying to outmaneuver the enemy. They were hunting them. Joe's soldiers moved through the battlefield like apex predators stalking prey. They used cover not for protection but for concealment as they positioned themselves to strike. When Zephyrian units advanced past their hidden positions, the humans attacked from behind with surgical precision. It wasn't random violence or berserker rage. Every action served a specific purpose. They targeted communication equipment to isolate units. They eliminated officers to break command structure. They struck at weak points in armor and equipment that shouldn't have been apparent to alien observers. How do they know Zephyrian tactical weaknesses so precisely? Vextar asked Colonel Park. Park watched the tactical display with satisfaction as enemy units reported increasing casualties and coordination failures. We study our opponents, their psychology, their technology, their social structure, their biology. Knowledge is the most powerful weapon. The clinical way Park described systematic analysis of alien species for combat purposes made Vextar deeply uncomfortable. The humans weren't just learning to fight Zephyrians, they were learning to hunt them with scientific precision. A breakthrough in the Coalition defense line brought Zephyrian shock troops within 50 meters of the medical station. Wounded soldiers from multiple species lay helpless as armored enemies approached with weapons ready. Medic Hyunwoo Nam moved to intercept them. Vextar expected to see a medic defending his patients with whatever weapons he could find. Instead, he witnessed something that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Nam didn't fight like a soldier. He moved like death incarnate, using his medical knowledge as a weapon of terrifying efficiency. His understanding of alien anatomy became a tool for precise destruction. Every strike targeted nerve clusters, joint weaknesses, and vital organs with surgical accuracy. The Zephyrian shock troops were elite warriors trained for close combat. They had natural armor and enhanced strength. They should have overwhelmed a single human medic in seconds. Instead, Nam systematically dismantled them with medical instruments that suddenly seemed designed for very different purposes. He moved between enemies like a surgeon conducting a complex operation, each action calculated for maximum effect with minimal effort. When the engagement ended, Nam immediately returned to tending wounded coalition soldiers. His hands, which had just delivered precise death, now worked to save lives with equal skill and gentleness. How? Was all Vextar could manage to say. Nam looked up from bandaging a Thessian soldier's wounds. His expression remained calm and professional. Healing and killing require the same knowledge. The difference is in the application and intent. The matter-of-fact way he explained using medical training to eliminate enemies made Vextar realize he was looking at something beyond normal military capability. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were professionals who understood life and death with frightening clarity. As the battle intensified, Vextar documented more examples of human combat effectiveness that defied explanation. They didn't just adapt to changing conditions. They seemed to anticipate enemy actions before they occurred. When Zephyrian forces attempted to encircle coalition positions, Private Yunahan and her squad were already waiting in ambush positions. When enemy air support focused on specific targets, human anti-aircraft teams had moved to optimal firing positions minutes earlier. "Are you monitoring enemy communications?" Vextar asked Lieutenant Colonel Jinwoo Yu. "Some," Yu admitted. "But mostly we just think like they think. Predict what we would do in their situation, then be ready for it." The casual confidence with which Yu described predicting enemy behavior suggested capabilities that went beyond normal tactical training. The humans seemed to understand warfare at a fundamental level that other species struggled to match. The most disturbing revelation came when Captain Sunho Bei coordinated what he called psychological operations against advancing Zephyrian forces. Instead of simply fighting the enemy, he was manipulating their emotions and decision-making processes. Human snipers didn't target the most dangerous enemies. They targeted specific individuals whose deaths would cause maximum psychological impact on survivors. Captured equipment was modified and returned to enemy lines with subtle malfunctions that created mistrust and paranoia among Zephyrian units. False communications convinced enemy commanders that they were facing much larger human forces. Staged. Evidence suggested that coalition forces had capabilities they didn't actually possess. The battlefield became a complex web of deception that made enemies defeat themselves through fear and confusion. "War is psychological as much as physical," Bei explained while coordinating these operations. "Break the enemy's will to fight, and their weapons don't matter." Vextar realized he was witnessing systematic warfare at a level of sophistication that no galactic species had ever documented. The humans weren't just fighting battles. They were orchestrating the complete psychological destruction of their opponents. As the day wore on, Zephyrian resistance began to collapse, not from overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, but from systematic elimination of their ability to function as an organized force. Human small unit tactics turned every engagement into a nightmare of uncertainty and death. Staff Sergeant Tae-hyun-oh coordinated final assaults on remaining enemy positions. He moved his soldiers with the same careful attention he showed when discussing his daughter's education. The same gentle voice that spoke of family pride now directed precise violence with devastating effectiveness. When a group of young Zephyrian soldiers attempted to surrender, Oh accepted their surrender with professional courtesy. He ensured they received medical care and proper treatment according to coalition military law. The same hands that had orchestrated their defeat now protected them as prisoners of war. "You care for enemies who tried to kill you?" Vextar asked. Oh looked at him with patient eyes. "Combat ends when the enemy stops fighting. After that, they're just people who need help. The war is between governments and ideologies, not between individuals." The philosophical distinction between political conflict and personal violence revealed another layer of human complexity that disturbed Vextar deeply. They could transition seamlessly between predatory efficiency and compassionate care without apparent psychological conflict. By sunset, coalition forces controlled the entire Bleeding Canyons region. Zephyrian casualties were catastrophic. Their command structure was eliminated. Their communication networks were destroyed. Surviving enemy forces had either surrendered or retreated in complete disorder. Human casualties were minimal. As evening approached, Vextar helped with casualty collection and intelligence gathering. He watched human soldiers transition from combat effectiveness to post-battle support with disturbing naturalness. The same troops who had systematically destroyed enemy forces now worked to save wounded Zephyrians with medical supplies and expertise. They treated prisoners with respect and provided comfort to coalition casualties with genuine compassion. Private Soo-young Choi shared her rations with captured enemy soldiers while discussing her plans to study agriculture after the war. Her earlier conversation about growing food took on new context as Vextar realized she approached creation and destruction with equal competence. Corporal Dong-ho Lee helped carry wounded Zephyrians to medical stations while talking about his sister's upcoming wedding. The same skills he used for infiltration and elimination now served to preserve life and provide aid. The duality was more than disturbing. It was terrifying. The humans could shift between predatory efficiency and compassionate care without missing a step. They weren't becoming monsters in combat. They were revealing that they had always been predators who chose when to hunt and when to protect. As night fell over the captured territory, Vextar began composing his report on human combat capabilities. But he found himself struggling to find words that would convey the truth without causing panic throughout the galactic community. How could he explain that humanity's newest allies were apex predators who had learned to use technology and cooperation? How could he describe their ability to shift between killing and healing with equal skill? How could he warn other species about capabilities that seemed almost supernatural in their effectiveness? For the first time since beginning his observation mission, Vextar wondered if some knowledge was too dangerous to document. The humans had revealed abilities that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever, and they had done it while treating. The victory celebration was quiet and professional. Coalition forces secured the captured territory with methodical efficiency, while human soldiers began the process of intelligence gathering and casualty assessment. There were no victory cries or triumphant displays. Just soldiers completing necessary work after a successful operation. Vextar walked through the former Zephyrian positions, documenting the aftermath for his report. The evidence of human combat effectiveness was overwhelming. Enemy fortifications had been neutralized with precision rather than overwhelming force. Communication centers were captured intact. Weapon caches were secured with minimal damage. Most disturbing was the psychological impact on surviving Zephyrian prisoners. These were elite warriors trained from birth for combat, yet they watched human guards with expressions of deep unease. When questioned about their defeat, they described fighting against enemies who seemed to understand Zephyrian tactics better than they understood them themselves. They knew what we would do before we did it, one captured officer told coalition interrogators. Every move we made, they were already there waiting. Like fighting ghosts who could see the future. Colonel Park conducted after-action interviews with his troops in a prefabricated building that served as temporary headquarters. Vextar positioned himself nearby to observe and record the debriefing sessions. Private Yuna Han discussed tactical improvements while field stripping captured Zephyrian weapons with practiced expertise. Her hands moved with confidence as she examined alien technology, immediately identifying weak points and design flaws that could be exploited in future engagements. Their energy cells have thermal regulation problems, she reported to Park. Extended firing causes overheating that reduces accuracy by 12% after 90 seconds of continuous use. Her earlier conversation about studying xenobiology after the war took on disturbing new meaning. Vextar realized she had been studying alien life forms, but not for peaceful scientific purposes. She was learning how to fight them more effectively. How did you identify these technical specifications so quickly? Vextar asked during a break in the debriefing. Han looked at him with patient eyes. You learn to notice details that matter for survival. Weapons, equipment, biology, psychology. Everything about potential enemies becomes important when your life depends on understanding them. The casual way she described comprehensive analysis of alien species for combat purposes made Vextar understand that human friendship came with careful evaluation of capabilities and weaknesses. Even allies were subjects of study and assessment. During medical evacuation procedures, Vextar observed human soldiers tending to wounded coalition troops with remarkable skill and gentleness. The same hands that had dealt precise death hours earlier now saved lives with equal proficiency and genuine compassion. Medic Hyunwoo Nam worked on a severely injured Draknari warrior, using advanced medical techniques to repair damage that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. His movements were careful and precise, guided by deep knowledge of alien physiology. "Your medical training covers multiple species?" Vextar asked. Nam looked up from his work, hands still moving to maintain pressure on a wound. "We study anatomy for all coalition species. Helps us treat injuries more effectively. Also helps us understand how different species function under stress." The dual nature of medical knowledge as both healing tool and tactical intelligence became clear. Nam could save the lives of alien allies and precisely target the weak points of alien enemies using the same expertise. As evening approached, Vextar attempted to interview Colonel Park about human combat doctrine and training methods. Park was professional and cooperative, but his answers revealed carefully controlled information rather than complete honesty. "Our success comes from good preparation and teamwork," Park explained while reviewing casualty reports. "We study our opponents, understand their capabilities, and develop appropriate responses. Your tactical effectiveness seems to exceed normal military training standards," Vextar pressed. "How do you account for such comprehensive capabilities?" Park paused in his work and looked directly at Vextar. His expression remained friendly, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Humans have experience with warfare, Observer. More experience than most species realize. We've learned to be very good at what we do." The casual way Park referenced human military experience sent a chill through Vextar's circulatory system. Earth was supposedly a peaceful world that had only recently achieved space travel. Yet these soldiers fought with the precision of species that had been conducting interstellar warfare for centuries. "What kind of experience?" Vextar asked carefully. Park's smile never wavered, but his answer carried undertones that made Vextar deeply uncomfortable. "The kind that teaches you how to win when losing means extinction. The kind that shows you what works and what doesn't when everything you care about is at stake." That night, Vextar reviewed battle footage and casualty reports in his temporary quarters. The evidence was overwhelming and disturbing. Human military effectiveness went far beyond anything documented in coalition intelligence files. They had fought with tactical sophistication that suggested centuries of military evolution. Their equipment was modified in ways that indicated deep understanding of combat requirements. Their coordination was flawless despite being a newly integrated species. Most troubling was their psychological profile. Every human soldier he interviewed showed the same characteristics: professional competence, genuine compassion for allies, and underlying predatory capability that never quite disappeared. Staff Sergeant Tae-hyun-oh had spoken lovingly about his daughter while systematically planning the elimination of enemy forces. Private Soo-young Choi had shared rations with prisoners while discussing agricultural techniques that could be applied to any world they conquered. Corporal Dong-ho Lee had helped wounded enemies while maintaining complete tactical awareness of all potential threats. The duality wasn't caused by military training or combat stress. It was fundamental to human nature. They were simultaneously the most compassionate and most dangerous species Vextar had ever encountered. A soft knock on his door interrupted his analysis. Sergeant Minji Kim entered carrying a tray with hot food and local plant matter prepared as a beverage. "Thought you might be hungry," she said with genuine concern. "Long day for everyone." Kim sat across from him while he ate, making casual conversation about the successful operation and plans for establishing permanent coalition presence in the region. Her manner was friendly and relaxed, just as it had been since his arrival. But Vextar noticed details he had missed before. Kim's positioning gave her clear sight lines to the door and window. Her hands remained within easy reach of the sidearm she carried. Her conversation included subtle questions about his observations and report plans. "What will you tell your superiors about our capabilities?" she asked with innocent curiosity. The question seemed casual, but Vexitar detected careful attention to his response. "I will report what I observed. Professional military competence and effective cooperation with coalition forces." Kim nodded approval. "That's accurate. We want to be good allies to the coalition. Peace benefits everyone when it's built on mutual respect and understanding." The emphasis on mutual respect carried implications that Vexitar was only beginning to grasp. Kim was gently reminding him that human friendship was conditional on reciprocal treatment. Cross them, and their remarkable capabilities could be directed toward very different purposes. After Kim left, Vexitar sealed his preliminary combat report and transmitted it to Keltharian High Command. The official documentation focused on tactical effectiveness and cooperation with coalition forces. Professional, positive, and incomplete. His personal files contained much more detailed analysis of human capabilities and psychological profiles. Information too sensitive to transmit through normal channels. Knowledge that could change galactic politics forever if properly understood. As he prepared for sleep, Vexitar reflected on the fundamental question his mission had raised. The humans were undoubtedly effective allies and capable soldiers. But what happened when their interests conflicted with other species? What happened when their definition of acceptable losses differed from coalition policy? Most importantly, what happened if they ever decided that other species represented threats to human survival and prosperity? Outside his window, human soldiers continued their post-battle duties with quiet efficiency. They moved through the darkness like natural predators, maintaining territory they had claimed through violence and defended through vigilance. For the first time since arriving on Nexus 7, Vexitar understood that he might be documenting the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, and they were treating him with professional courtesy and genuine friendship, while demonstrating exactly why crossing them would be the last mistake any species ever made. The humans weren't hiding their capabilities. They were simply allowing allies to see them in the most favorable light possible. The choice of how to interpret that favor was left to the wisdom and judgment of their observers. Vexitar fell asleep wondering if wisdom and judgment would be enough to guide the galaxy. Through the implications of humanity's true nature, Vexitar stared at his blank report screen for the third hour of his final day on Nexus 7. How could he explain to Keltharian High Command what he had witnessed without causing panic across the galaxy? How could he describe humanity's true capabilities without triggering the very conflicts those capabilities were designed to prevent? The transport ship would arrive in 6 hours to return him to Coalition headquarters. His official observations were due within 24 hours of departure. Every word would be analyzed by intelligence specialists from dozens of species, each looking for advantages they could gain or threats they needed to counter. A soft knock interrupted his struggling thoughts. Colonel Park entered the temporary office carrying 2 cups of the stimulant beverage humans called coffee. "Thought you might need this," Park said, settling into the chair across from Vexitar's desk. "Final reports are always the hardest part of any mission." Vexitar accepted the cup gratefully. The bitter liquid helped clear his mind, though it couldn't resolve his fundamental dilemma. How do you write about experiences that others might not understand correctly? Park studied him, with steady eyes. You tell the truth as clearly as possible. Let others decide what to do with that truth. Some truths might be dangerous to share. More dangerous than ignorance? Park leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed despite discussing matters that could affect galactic stability. Knowledge shared between allies builds trust. Knowledge hidden creates suspicion and fear. The Colonel's casual confidence in discussing such weighty matters exemplified everything that made humans simultaneously reassuring and terrifying as allies. They approached the most serious subjects with the same calm professionalism they brought to combat operations. Your people are more capable than initial intelligence assessments suggested, Vexitar said carefully. Most species underestimate others until they have direct experience, Park agreed. We're happy to exceed expectations when it benefits our allies. The phrasing suggested that human effectiveness was calibrated to circumstances and relationships. They could be devastatingly capable when necessary, but chose to reveal only as much as required for specific situations. What if other species feel threatened by human capabilities? Park's expression grew serious. Then we would need to have honest conversations about concerns and misunderstandings. War comes from fear and miscommunication. Peace comes from respect and cooperation. The emphasis on honest conversation carried clear implications. Humans valued directness and straightforward relationships. Attempts at deception or manipulation would be detected and responded to accordingly. Sergeant Minji Kim arrived with data tablets containing final mission statistics and casualty reports. Her presence provided additional perspective on human, military culture, and post-conflict procedures. Observer Vexitar has concerns about writing his report, Park explained to Kim. He wants to be accurate without causing unnecessary alarm. Kim settled into a third chair, completing their informal discussion group. What specific aspects worry you? Vexitar chose his words carefully. Your tactical effectiveness exceeded all projections. Your coordination was flawless despite limited experience with coalition forces. Your casualty rates were impossibly low, given the intensity of opposition faced. We prepare thoroughly, Kim replied simply. Good preparation leads to good results. The level of preparation suggests capabilities that go beyond what most species achieve in centuries of military development. Park and Kim exchanged a brief look. Some unspoken communication passed between them before Park responded. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We learned what we needed to learn in order to survive. Earth taught us lessons that some species never need to face. The reference to Earth as a harsh teacher implied that human military development was driven by existential pressures rather than political ambition. They had learned to fight because the alternative was extinction. What kind of lessons? Vexitar asked. Kim's expression grew distant. How to win when you're outnumbered. How to survive when you're outgunned. How to protect what matters when everything wants to destroy it. The philosophical tone suggested that human military capability was rooted in defensive, rather than aggressive, motivations. They had developed apex predator skills to protect their civilization rather than to conquer others. And now you apply those lessons to galactic warfare? We apply them to whatever threatens our allies or our values, Park said firmly. The techniques are the same. The scale and context change, but the fundamental principles remain constant. Their final conversation revealed the key insight Vexitar needed for his report. Human military effectiveness wasn't an anomaly or accident. It was the result of evolutionary and cultural pressures that had shaped them into natural defenders who could become devastating attackers when circumstances required it. As departure time approached, Vexitar completed his official report with clarity and honesty. He described human tactical capabilities, coordination effectiveness, and psychological resilience in terms that accurately conveyed their military value without sensationalizing their potential threat. His recommendations emphasized the importance of maintaining positive relationships with humanity and including them in all major military planning discussions. He suggested that human expertise could benefit all coalition species if properly integrated into joint operations. The classified appendix contained more detailed analysis of human combat psychology and tactical innovation. This information would be restricted to senior intelligence analysts who needed to understand the full scope of humanity's capabilities for strategic planning purposes. Private Yuna Han helped him carry his equipment to the transport landing pad. Her conversation revealed the duality that had fascinated and disturbed him throughout his mission. I hope your report helps build stronger cooperation between our species, she said while loading his recording devices with careful attention to their fragile components. There's so much we can learn from each other when we work together peacefully. The same hands that had wielded weapons with deadly precision now handled scientific equipment with gentleness and respect. Her genuine desire for peaceful cooperation coexisted with capabilities that could devastate any species that threatened human interests. Staff Sergeant Tae-hyun-oh arrived to bid farewell, bringing pictures from his daughter's recent school performance. His obvious pride in her academic achievements contrasted starkly with the tactical knowledge he had demonstrated in combat. She wants to study alien cultures and languages, O explained, showing images of a young human female receiving academic awards. Maybe become a diplomat or cultural exchange specialist. The future will need people who can build bridges between different worlds. The generational perspective revealed humanity's long-term approach to galactic relations. They were raising children to value cooperation and understanding, while maintaining the capability to defend those values against any threat. As the transport prepared for departure, Colonel Park delivered final comments that would shape Vextar's understanding of human nature forever. "We hope this operation demonstrated that humans can be valuable allies," Park said with characteristic directness. "We bring unique capabilities to the coalition, but more importantly, we bring genuine commitment to shared values and mutual protection." The formal words carried deeper meaning that Vextar was learning to recognize. Humans valued loyalty and reciprocity above all other relationship factors. Treat them as trusted allies, and their remarkable capabilities would be dedicated to common defense. Treat them as threats or subordinates, and those same capabilities would be redirected accordingly. During the journey back to Coalition headquarters, Vextar refined his analysis and prepared for the inevitable questions from intelligence debriefers. His observations would influence galactic policy toward humanity for generations to come. The fundamental conclusion was both reassuring and sobering. Humans were apex predators who had learned to cooperate and use technology for defensive purposes. They could be the most valuable allies any species could hope for, but only as long as the relationship remained based on mutual respect and shared interests. Cross them or threaten their core values, and they would become something no galactic civilization was prepared to handle. The choice of which version of humanity to encounter rested entirely with how other species chose to treat them. 6 weeks later, Vextar received a message from Sergeant Kim. She had been promoted to lieutenant and was now training mixed coalition units in what she called adaptive combat techniques. Her message included photos of human soldiers teaching alien cadets wilderness survival, first aid, and tactical coordination. The images showed humans working patiently with young coalition recruits from multiple species. Private Soo-young Choi demonstrated field medical procedures to a group of Thessian cadets. Corporal Dong-ho Lee taught camouflage and reconnaissance techniques to Draknari trainees. Staff Sergeant Tae-hyun-oh led a mixed group through equipment maintenance procedures. What struck Vextar most profoundly was a background image showing Colonel Park playing with local children from the settlement near the training facility. His face showed the same gentle expression Vextar remembered from their conversations about peace and philosophy. The same hands, though,